this forwarding model, we are analyzing OBO structure in relation to both Jakarta and Nusantara. So the first phase that we're kind of looking at is understanding the planning and real estate development in relation to both OBO and, again, as a site analysis of moving the embassy from Jakarta to Nusantara in Indonesia. So in order to analyze this, it's important to understand kind of a little bit of the background of the OBO structure. OBO has a division of planning and evaluation, which kind of gets further divided into master planning and site assessment. These divisions focus mostly on the market analysis, market surveys, feasibility studies, and really understanding the site, as well as taking over the site acquisition, management of federal sites as well. And then understanding another way that the OBO makes the decisions can be best explained through the embassy effect. So the embassy effect takes into consideration the three major factors of economic influence, environmental influence, and social influence. So understanding that an embassy will, at the end of the day, impact all of these three factors, the ideal situation is to have a positive effect on the acquisition of the new land or where the new embassy will take place.
So one of the very first things that we decided to take a look at for the new site location in Nusantara, one of the things that we had to decide was if we wanted to have an embassy location that was either a centralized or decentralized approach. So to give a broad overview of the two, a centralized location is a building type where all the functions are in one singular location, whereas the decentralized is kind of an opposite approach. Functions are located in different buildings and different locations in the city. The current Jakarta site is centralized, so we felt that this was the more beneficial option for the new site due to it being easier logistically, more cost-effective, and safer. And then so after we decided that we wanted to do a centralized approach in a similar fashion to Jakarta, our next step was trying to understand the current site and the area that it's in and the surrounding and its surroundings. So the existing embassy is in a very highly developed area, numerous public transportation spots around it, bus stations. There's a train station across the street. Other foreign embassies are around there, museums, parks. This is, again, another sign of the embassy effect. It's highly developed, and it is something that we wanted to think about when we were picking a new site location for the Nusantara site, because like in Jakarta, we want a very high developed area, and we just feel that it was safer and a better spot for the new embassy.
Now we studied embassy and the new site in terms of global drivers. Coming to the resources, the site is rich with resources such as minerals, timber, and fossil fuels, which are found abundantly in all over the country and serve as main exports for the country. For technology, the technology is a powerful tool in Jakarta, and the technology is mainly focused in the large centers of the country, while others are neglected. The climate, the embassy design accounts passive design measures. The design strategies form eco-diplomatic to improve resilience and also demonstrates US climate leadership. For the population, present Jakarta is overly populated, which results in the increase of pollution and waste. Coming for urbanization in the embassy site is well developed and highly community oriented. Being located in the heart of the city, it has easy access to every transportation. Coming to the Nusantara site, The climate, the city is located in the bay on the coast of Borneo, closer to equator, with 1,000 meters above sea level, having hot, humid climate with rains all year around. The city is prone to drought, river pollution, stagnant pools, and forest fires. Population, proposed city area is 256 and 143 hectares, with 3,721 million population and 2.24% of growth rate by 2020. With the announcement of new capital, the pollution and GDP are estimated to high level increase. Coming to resources, the geographical condition of the city results with abundant mineral deposits, and the land is suitable for plantation, livestock, and fisheries. The land also have mining deposits such as oil, coal, gold, and silver. Coming to the urbanization, the city is in a rural setting where the urbanization might increase with the capital announcement. Here, the main transportations are water and road. Having the Sipingan International Airport only 32 kilometers away and a major port located nearby. Coming to the real estate, the economic effects on people will be extraordinary even before the move, as they are already feeling its impact. One measure of that is soaring land prices in Sepaku, where a hectare near the main land can be sold at least 2.5 billion rupee compared to just under 100 million rupee a few years ago. It is responsible to assume that the price of land in new capital will also raise to higher price, which would make decentralization embassy cost more than the centralized embassy. Now, security and population. Beside the scientific reasons given, it is whispered that the 2016 takeover of central Jakarta by radical Muslim youth left the city defenseless. Ultimately, Jawaki assaulted the demonstrators by praying with them in the open. The desire to be in a secure, distant, less populated capital perhaps stems from that experience. Last, with resources. From the resources perspective, water is relatively bigger issue. A new reservoir was constructed in Nusantara, held through PT Arsatrita Pradana, can supply 8.5 cubic liters a second of clean water. The reserve is located about 25 kilometers away from where the new presidential palace will be built.
Since the new capital wasn't yet accomplished, we are making assumption according to the released city zone. Then we compare our two proposal sites, which is selecting the site in the government zone and selecting site on the junction of multiple zones. We show the comparison by the rubric and find that the factors causing the difference are urbanization and population, as we lay out the pros and cons below. So moving to the conclusion, selecting the proposed site B, we can get a better performance in urbanization and population perspective because it is more helpful for the improvement of interaction between the embassy and local culture, which will provide a stronger bond between the two countries diplomatically and culturally.
And then moving on to the next phase, we focused in on the design and project delivery and what different types of methods that the phases of designs and project deliveries was discovered here. So within phases of design, there's a few different types that's throughout the whole project. You have your programming, which is more so your research development and how they try to compare the data and analyze it all early on, which then transitions into the schematic design phase, where they're with the owner and talk about the design needs and wants and for the end goal of the project. And then going on to design development, it explores further past where decisions are made of the overall look of the building, where it includes the location, materials, floor plans, etc. Then this is then converted into construction documents for not only from the architect's point of view, but as well as the engineers to get the construction started. And the construction bidding is where you'll have multiple contractors who, if they want to take on this project, they'll of course bid and the owner chooses the best for price and so forth. And then the construction administration involves the architect monitoring the construction and verify that everything is going as planned. And so here it's within a scheduled type setting, like how I explained in the previous slide. It just shows the different time frames and weeks of how long each phase would take for each part of the project.
Okay, next we looked at project delivery methods. The 4 that we looked at were design, bid, build, construction management at risk, design, build, and integrated project delivery. And then we're looking at each one a little closer. Design, bid, build is best for projects that aren't as complex. And they have 3 phases: design, procurement, and construction. And then construction management at risk acts the construction manager acts as a consultant to the owner and assumes risk for the construction. Under design build, it's a collaborative process between architect and engineers and allows for flexibility in overlapping phases. And the last one, integrated project design or project delivery. It's the most collaborative amongst the 4. Between the because it uses a joint contract between the parties, and it is often the most transparent and innovative. Okay, and then here we took a closer look at all 4, and then we started looking at them as to seeing which would be the best one to use. We found some to be that could have benefits and then negatives as well. Some were good, some were budget friendly, but not very creative, whereas others were a little more creative, but higher costs. And in the end, we decided design, bid, build would be the best for our needs, as it allows for redesign and rebid if need be because of that timeline that this one follows. And then ultimately as well, it was the one that had the lowest cost. It was allowed for more creativity and allowed for more owner involvement.
Coming to the design parameters, first one is diplomatic security. The place serves as the place serves as a place for diplomats to work and reside, allowing by being representatives from USA. The design should not have a strong visual separation from its immediate surroundings, allows transition space that will make the design more approachable. Along with these, it has to follow the structural norms as well. Location specificity. Embassies often located in the country's capital. However, there is no set rules. As the country is in the process of moving their capital to a new city, Nusantara, the US were to move their embassy. It would acknowledge the new city as the new capital. However, the present embassy is built in Jakarta in 2019. Contextual responses. This is an external element influences both the building and site. The factors includes the nature of the surroundings, that is natural and built elements. These determines the architectural style, building materials, and the site layout, which is very important in creating an effective design. Therefore, all these promotes the continuity between the building and the local circumstances. Coming to the design variables, the planning strategies in the new site. When it comes to the building strategy, the most important thing is to meet the client needs. Looking at the embassy design in Nusantara, the building has to be secured, but not to look like a fortress. It is apparent that the security is the biggest factor while designing embassies. London and Beirut embassies can serve as examples where the embassies has to be relocated for the safety issues. One way to address this is by the site selection. Being that the embassy is a government building, the new embassy will be fall into a government zone. As a result, this can play in favor of providing a secure location because this will lead to many high security buildings in close proximity. But if there is no zones, it would be ideal for an embassy to be close to the city center as it currently is in Jakarta. However, because of these zones within the city, this will give area for selection for the new site.
For the structural systems, we mainly took a overall look at how the building is structured as well as some of the features that it carries for it. When it comes to different things, there were open spaces for the public so that way it doesn't seem that it's enclosed or cased off, but it still has the proper security needed for a US embassy. It also has the solar screens, metal blades for allowing shade and natural lighting as well. The location, it's specifically within the compound. And overall, based off of how it connects within the 5 global drivers, is known for having Jakarta is known for having a large population. It typically struggles with clean water and has not so great energy resources. So a solution that was put into the building or something that could be prompted for the newer one is to improve on at least the structural systems when it comes to the weather, and particularly anything related to still the shading as well as any types of drought and or flooding.
To add on to the structural comment, understanding how material system impacts the global drivers in Jakarta is of extreme importance in understanding, the vulnerabilities that exist, like it was mentioned before, the population, the climate, as well as the resources that Jakarta offers. So really understanding more sustainable materials, whether they're local materials or sustainably produced. Also understanding material systems through sustainable methods or grading systems, such as the Green Building Council of Indonesia, and having some sort of measurement as to how materials are used, how the energy is used, and how the site is used as well. All that plays into the materials. Also understanding with the diversity in the climate of Jakarta and Indonesia, and then moving forward to the new site, really understanding once material systems are used, how to best benefit. So again, to reiterate, having, like, for example, having perforated metals as solar screens, but also understanding the new drive for the Indonesian government on more sustainable systems, including biodegradable material, vernacular architecture building methods, engaging in more local craftsmanship, and again, just really taking into consideration more sustainable building methods when taking into consideration materials.
Also getting into the building technology for the Jakarta embassy, technology for a building is one of the most important aspects nowadays. I mean, especially in a building like this, where Jakarta, like we talked about earlier, has some energy problems, has some energy conservation problems, and that's really one of their main goals. This is a LEED Gold building in itself, and so obviously there's a lot of energy solutions, a lot of energy technology that goes into this building. That's certainly important, along with security. They have classified security solutions and programs, along with the more simpler stuff like metal detectors and that kind of thing. But we studied this because it's important. We wanted to kind of transfer it over to the new site and really just understand any kind of system or technology that relates to global drivers and relates to the Jakarta site as well as the new Nusantara site. Just really anything that we could bring over to improve the occupant experience.
So after talking the response to different global drivers by planning strategy, structure system, material system, and building technology, we can form the rubric by adding points when the design variables address one driver or parameter. So looking at the results, although the planning strategy seems having the higher score, but most points come from the released zoning plans, which is on a bigger scale. So focusing on the building itself, a well-designed material system and building technology have more potential to create higher performance within the new embassy.
Next phase is facilities management and operations. Here we studied about the main issues in the building and the facility, how it manages and maintain the building. In this in this phase, we studied the embassy design strategies and how they improved upon the building's function. We examined the Nusantara site and studied how some existing strategies in the present embassy may be implemented in the new embassy's building, as well as coming up with new strategies that further improve upon the building in its new city and environment. Studying deeper on facilities management and operations, facilities management's main purpose is to ensure the functionality, comfort, safety, efficiency, and infrastructure in the building. And OBO describes its facility management and operations as a long-range systematic process, which significantly proved much effective with cost and sustainable the building over their life cycle. Coming to the operations, the main goal of the operations is to provide the technical and management expertise to support day-to-day activities and long-term operations in the embassies. Next slide. Here are a few of the functions of facilities management and operations. Next slide. Here, the main activities are divided into components as hard facilities and software facilities and what comes under them. Mainly the planning strategies, real estate development, managing and responding to the maintenance comes under hardwares, where the softwares is like looking after building security, interior space planning, environmental health and safety issues, catering, food services, cleaning, sanitization, waste management, and mail management.
Next, we were looking at 5 main risk and vulnerabilities that the site might see. Particularly in Jakarta, flooding is the main issue. And as a result, the city itself is currently sinking. Next, the overpopulation, because originally it was only designed to hold about 800,000 people, but as of 2020, it's nearly at 11 million people. And because Jakarta does have an equatorial climate, sun exposure is a constant thing that results in higher costs for heating and cooling of buildings. Security can be a physical and digital issue because of the overpopulation. There's a lot of people constantly going through the building itself. And then cybersecurity is really needed because it is a high profile building. It could be prone to cyber attacks. And then pollution is also a big issue because of the high population. There's a lot of congestion, and it results in a lot of traffic and contributes globally as well to greenhouse gases and climate change. And next, we applied them to these risks to the 5 global drivers and how they could be addressed. Under technology, it is a new generation of secure and sustainable and high performance building. So they can address those issues that way. Next, for resources, it is a high performance building, and it takes building that take into account the long life cycle cost to reduce resources such as water and energy usage. Next, for the climate and things that in the area that it could be prone to, the building was designed to withstand flooding and earthquakes. And then under the urbanization, the embassy site is designed as the main building in a is secluded from traffic, congestion, and the landscape around the building helps reduce the air and sound pollution. And for population, this could be a safety issue. And therefore the embassy site is selected in a low crime zone and in the heart of the city itself.
So again, this is further exploration of the existing embassy and how they use design to better the user experience. Some of the strategies that we discovered were more non-traditional compared to normal embassies. They tried to really reduce like the compound look, the compound effect that an embassy might have on its surrounding location. So they use things like blast resistant glass, which you normally don't find a whole lot of glass in embassies. Low knee-high walls and green spaces were all used to improve the overall visuals and impressions that was left on the surrounding community. And then, so next, a big part of their building, like I said earlier, is their energy conservation goals. Is the building itself is a LEED Gold building. With Jakarta and Indonesia being a high CO2 emitter, it's important that these systems like solar panels and sun shadings are running at their highest quality at all times. So that was really what we talked about with management and oversight, trying to make sure that these systems that are helping Jakarta keep their CO2 emissions down, it's important that these systems are running as best as they possibly can.
Another way to analyze the success of the management of the building with this case study was understanding how the embassy used its operations and resource allocation. So in this sense, the analysis was done through the water mitigation, both inside and outside of the building. So operations and resource allocation accounts for the safety, functionality, efficiency, and comfort of the environment. And one of the things that this building did successfully was really managing and treating water both within the building and outside the building. This is particularly important because flooding is a huge threat in Jakarta. So as well as seasons of drought. So really understanding how to maximize water efficiency, both in seasons of drought and mitigate it in seasons of flooding is what makes the project really successful. Next, please. So with that being said, the way that it uses resources on a more specific level was these idea of bioswales and natural water treatment, as well as rain collecting methods from the roof system. So really understanding and really taking into account the climate that exists within Jakarta and designing to best, again, take advantage and mitigate any threats. And lastly, another way that water mitigation in this building contributed to the success of the management is, again, really understanding the use of technology and maximizing building security. So this was analyzed in two different ways. So building security, again, in the sense of natural threats, but also physical threats. So what that entails is again, providing water source, during moments of drought, but also mitigating it during the monsoon seasons. But also with these biofiltration gardens and the rain collecting roof system, it really allows the building to, again, filtrate and store its own water and not take away resources from the city of Jakarta itself. So as it stands, it doesn't take away from the infrastructure of the city. It kind of stands on its own. Furthermore, the layered landscape not only, again, absorbs and mitigates a lot of the flooding that happens, during the monsoon season, but they act as natural barriers to the building itself. And so some of the design excellences included certain setbacks from main roads. And so these setbacks provide that kind of natural barrier and kind of heighten the building security, but also double as, public space to be used by the inhabitants.
And then another design strategy that we focused on within Jakarta was for sun shading. Within Jakarta, it's typically super humid, warm, and wet. It's the same goes for when it comes to Nusantara that we'll discuss for later on. But within this specific building, it has different types of features to help with that, like the screen walls for the terraces that are on the building, as well as the orientation of the building they consider, just so it helps reduce the solar exposure. And then they also put a specific type of glass, the photovoltaic glass, to be specific, to help with the UV radiation and as well as the VLT. And it also helps reduce with the carbon footprint. This helps with lowering the electricity bill, but overall, the building itself is a representation of the local culture within the notions of the woven textile and bamboo, while being contextually aware in the environment with a concise building since within that city, since it struggles in that area. But within the new site, some of the risk and vulnerabilities that are in it, we had drought. So apparently, with the research that was done, there's very little type of water vapor when it comes to, clouds and fog. So it's fairly small against the world's total when it comes to water. They do have a river source for when it comes to drinking water, but they want to make sure, or isn't sure, if it will be enough for the population, since that is a growing factor with Jakarta. Another one was the hazing, and with that, there has been some land burnt type areas within, and the regions that were affected were central, west, and south, commonly time areas. So because of that, it affects the air quality and created haze. So we're going to try to find a way or a solution on how that can be reduced so the citizens' health doesn't get affected. Another one is earthquakes, and it's pretty much about the same within the Jakarta area. It's pretty moderate, and so within the new embassy, we still want to make sure that the building and compound is strong and supportive and is prepared for any type of potential earthquakes that may come in the future. And then the final one was shading. Similar to the Jakarta site, once again, it is a hot and humid site and does have a lot of sun exposure. So we want to make sure that we still have shading and different methods on how to keep the building cool and so forth for that. And so with some of these strategies for the drought, a solution for that we thought of was to have some type of cooling method where machines would pull in the air to try to remove the dust and other particles, while at the same time try to catch any either evaporation or condensation within the air to then have filtered and then be able to have within the building. With the hazing, we also thought of a filtration system where whether these newer buildings that will be built would take in the air and also filter that out and have fresher air for the insides of the building as well. And hopefully it could reduce the pollution within the environment and hopefully have a better health effect amongst the citizens. And with the earthquake one, we had a couple ideas, one of them being a flexible foundation, which helps the structure remain steady and only moves certain parts of the building when the earthquake hits to take in and absorb the vibrations. And some other ones were traditional strategies that are typically used today, where it would be like resistant materials and just making sure the building is super reinforced. And then finally, with the shading one, they wanted to try a different approach, which is a biomimetic approach, which is just learning about the new surroundings and how they want to base off their urban design and landscape that way, as well as potentially the orientations of the building. So similar to what they did back in Jakarta. And yes.
Unlike other rubrics, we created the rubric, this one, to find the priority within all the global drivers. In other words, this rubric is to show the performance of the Jakarta embassy. So to understand this, it is better to find a global driver that have less points and provide a design strategy to address it. For our case, since the city plan zoning has already helped us to tackle the urbanization and population parts, so in the new side, we can say that ideally, new embassies should come up with the method addressing them, but we don't need to worry too much because the lower performance without the, we don't need to worry about too much about the lower performance with the two drivers. After studying Jakarta Embassy, we combined the analysis of new potential site risk and vulnerabilities that would require new solution. In conclusion, since the current embassy was very successful in designing energy system and structural system, we agreed that these design methods should be considered in the new building in Nusantara.
End of life and asset disposal. This is the last phase for the module 2. In this, we studied about, as all buildings are bound to be have an end of life stage. In this stage, in this phase, we studied about OBO solutions and new other solutions, what to be made of the existing building as we propose to move the embassy to the new city. Building life cycle. This happens in 4 stages: the production stage, construction stage, usage stage, and the end of life stage. The production stage, where the raw materials are extracted, transported, and converted into construction materials. The construction stage is where the building takes its form, and the building requires a considerable amount of energy and materials in this stage. The third is the usage stage. This is the longest of all the stages in the life cycle. In this stage, the building is to be maintained and is characterized by circular strategies as reuse, repair, and refurbish to extend the lifespan of the building. The usage stage and the last stage is the end of service stage. This is the stage where we studied in this phase. Next slide. For the energy use, the different energy demands during the phases are manufacturing of materials, transportation of materials, occupancy, renovation, demolition, and removal. And why building life cycle assessment is needed, because to identify the building's environmental hotspots when it comes to carbon emissions and other environmental impacts, achieve credits for green buildings ratings, and compare the design alternatives and choose high performing ones by finding more suitable sustainable materials and evaluating building site options comparing to the environmental impacts. Next slide.
So also taking into consideration the analysis of another perspective through OBO is really understanding how federal lands and assets are usually treated. So these include excess, federal transfer, surplus property, negotiated sale, and public sale. So excess really refers to any federal agency that no longer needs a specific property. And so it kind of tags that property as excess and then takes measures from then on. And that could be, federal transfer, which basically the property is taken over by another federal agency, or surplus property, which is, again, if the property is deemed not needed within the federal government and determined as surplus, it could then be made available through uses of public benefit, negotiated sales, or public sales. And then the negotiated sale would basically set a sale price at an appraised fair market value with the state or local government, as well as for intended public use. But then a public sale is if this federal property isn't acquired by state or local government, it can dispose of the surplus property being a competitive sale to the public. So really understanding all the intricacies of federal land and government land will give a better understanding of how OBO tackles its properties and the proposal that we have.
So next, we just kind of researched the traditional disposal procedures. There was three main ones that we really looked at. This slide just talked about demolition, which is basically just destruction of the building completely. Pretty simple. Now, if we go to the next one, the other two that we looked at were auction, which is basically just selling off the building to the highest bidder. Donation, which is donating the building to basically just an organization in need. We looked at all three of these in reference to the existing Jakarta building. We weren't really satisfied with any of them. We didn't feel that they really gave proper due to the building itself and to OBO. So later we'll talk about the other examples that we explored and which one we ended up choosing.
So another kind of perspective that we brought up is an OBO call to action, specifically an agency employed by OBO, which establishes green building principles and eco-diplomacy. What we want to establish is a reminder that, eco-diplomacy doesn't just end once the building is no longer in use, but since OBO has made the pledge to sustainability and green building principles and some sort of level of eco-diplomacy, really taking that into consideration when announcing the end of life of a building. So that could be, setting it from an energy consumption to using environmentally preferable products, emphasis on protecting and conserving water, optimizing ecosystems. And this is particularly important because the new capital of Nusantara is considered a rainforest. So really kind of highlighting these ideas that are already employed by OBO during the lifespan of a building, but considering it into this particular phase of a new embassy in a new city. And here we just kind of wanted to highlight all of the existing embassies through OBO that have been LEED certified. So again, just a way to highlight that, you know, LEED certification shouldn't just be the end all be all, but sustainability should come into play at every phase of the project, especially end of life.
And then we took a further look and explored some different alternative methods that would potentially fit our site better. We have redistribution, which would be more so renting and leasing, and it could be a good option for the OBO because it helps them make profit and they would still have control of the building. Another one would be renovation to just restore the current building. It may not be the best strategy since ours is relocating, but it would require a large scale of workers and it could create job opportunities as well. And then within the deconstruction method, it would just take the existing building and its materials and reuse them elsewhere, which would have a lower impact on the environment. It would save costs for demolition as well as landfill, but it also would require a large scale of workers to deconstruct this building and the compound of this size. So it would create a lot of job opportunities within Jakarta. And then further on, benefits of reducing the disposal, it's similar to what the alternative methods talked about, which would basically create employment for these people, reduce overall building project expenses, and as well as lead to fewer disposal facilities, and it would offset the environmental impact associated with extraction and consumption with the production of like new materials. So it conserves landfill space, which is something Jakarta would need, as well as the new site of Nusantara, so they don't take up too much land so quickly.
Next, we use this matrix to go ahead and determine which one would be best. We awarded a point for the following categories, which were climate, urbanization/population, technology/resources, and OBO benefits. And then we also removed a point if we believe that it would be a hindrance, and no point was awarded if there was no true gain or loss. And after going through, the one that came out with the most points was at 4 for redistribution.
Yeah, so like he said, our final choice was redistribution. Mainly, we felt that this reason was the best because the existing building is relatively new. It was finished in 2019. We felt like the other options would be kind of a waste to OBO and the building itself. This option allows for OBO to keep the building, rent or lease the space, and allows others to enjoy it. Or they can reconfigure the space in the building itself to allow for a more community-focused approach in its local surroundings. Either way, this option gives OBO more flexibility and allows for the building and its systems to be used and enjoyed.
And then in conclusion, within this phase, it just mainly summed up how it set up a standard practice for dealing with embassies. This included the traditional methods as well as alternative methods on what may have best seemed fit for our site. And basically from what we gathered, we found that each site carries with its specific parameters and drives that influences the method of our redistribution option. And in conclusion, our proposal was to leave the building where it is and just have the new Centaura location reconstruct a whole new one, but just with the options of materials and so forth that we suggested. And that is our presentation. Thank you.